Good morning, everyone. As normal, as we come into the webinar, people start to log in, I'd like to welcome you to the British springtime and British summertime. It's all happened in just 1 week. Last week it was snowing, and this week it's been red hot. For those who forgot the sunscreen like myself, I burnt my ears, so I'd like to hear whether you can hear me, and if you can hear me, drop me a line, but do it quietly because my ears are absolutely killing me from the sunburn, but there you go. I keep saying that in recruitment, we have it the wrong way round. We train easy and fight hard. When, like the great Ali said, he trained hard to fight easy, and he genuinely hated training. But we invest a huge amount of money every year in our most expensive bit of kit that we ever buy. And then we do very little to get the true potential out of that little kit. I read a report last week saying that most recruitment agencies use less than 30% of their CRM capabilities. I've not read stats on the most expensive commodity, people, but when you start to look at the attrition rate and burnout rate in recruitment, I wouldn't think that number is too far off of what we're getting out of the recruiters that we recruit. Because recruitment in the main, the standard training program is a couple of days in a classroom, then a week of mirror me and copy me, and then we get the trainee, put them straight on the phone, cover them in a big steel bar, throw them in a swimming pool, and tell them to either sink or swim. And quite a lot sink, a lot swim. They get to the surface, and then as true recruitment managers, what do? We put our foot gently on their head and send them back down again to hope that they can recover and come back stronger than they did before. So the question is why? So today we're going to discover what good looks like from a training point of view. We're going to look why we should be training hard to get the best out of our recruiters, so ensure that our revenue increases, our reduction of attrition improves, our increased in happiness of our team improves, we improve our EVP, and throughout this discussion, please remember the following 2 quotes. Train people well enough so they can leave, treat them well enough so they don't. If we train them and they leave, what happens? But what happens if we don't train them and they stay? So today I've got Paul Sharp and Heather. Paul Jacobs will be joining us, but as always, he's a little bit late. He's probably talking to somebody and hasn't known when to stop us yet. So he'll be joining us very, very shortly. So Paul and Heather, welcome everybody else. It's, I say, bright and sunny here in Leeds. So let's sort of kick off really quickly. Where do we start and how do we work out what we need when it comes to training?
Great question.
Thanks, Heather. I'm glad someone's
Heather, I'm off now.
Yeah, no, great question. And we all have to work out where do we need to start? Where do we need to go? For me, it comes back to our business plan. So have we got a business plan? Do we know what we're trying to achieve? Training for training's sake is fun. There's nothing wrong with training for training's sake, but all of our training needs to be moving us towards achieving our goals, and we need to understand what it is that we're trying to achieve from it. You mentioned EVP. At the moment, there has never been a time when our EVP is more important. So that's our employee value proposition. Understanding where we position ourselves as an employer, how we attract people to come and work for us, how we hire them, how are we going to do that, and how our learning and development plans feed into our employer brand and our employer value proposition, frankly, has never been more important. I don't know if you saw the piece in Recruiter yesterday about recruitment businesses and being busier than they've ever been, and there being more vacancies for people to join recruitment businesses than ever before. This is massively competitive market at the moment. Paul, you're nodding like desperately. You got something to add in here. Go for it.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I think I'm only smiling because I've been interviewing. I interviewed on Tuesday night. I've interviewed this morning for a client to help and support them. And you're absolutely right. I think it's coming on to roost a little bit. So 12 months ago, we did say that how you treat people was going to come back, and you'd either benefit from it or it would impinge your plans going forward. And I think we're at that moment now where how you've treated people is now paying dividends or coming on to roost. I think going back to the plan is really important, because everything we do around your values, and some of the work that Howard and I have been doing with individuals, is about how do you make those values come to life. And if you say one of your values is, treating people well or developing them, but you're not actually doing that, then you can't say that's one of your values. So there's just a massive mismatch there. And I think, for me, the question I always ask, and like I said, Howard and I have been doing a lot of this recently, is with you people, I always use this metrics about support and challenge. We give a lot of people a lot of challenge, but we don't always give them a lot of support. And support and challenge should be equal. Support has got to be about the training. So if we just stop for a second and just pause and think, what training have my people had to be better at their jobs, and how have I helped them be more successful through training them over the last 2, 3, 4, 5 months. And this doesn't just extend to your consultants, it extends to your back office staff as well. So your management accountant, your marketing person, everybody. What training have we delivered to help them be more successful? And in most cases, not in all, but in a lot of cases, we train them from within the business. So they're only getting to know as much as what the owner knows. So we do have to think about, how do we give people skills and development and training and techniques that we don't currently use, or that maybe other agencies are using, or other successful organizations are, that we don't. And I think that's a really key point for me.
I think when we look at it in that fashion, you've got to start thinking about what we do now as a training from a recruitment point of view. And what you've said there, Paul, is absolutely right. We come across that so often, the lack of training material, and the training just comes out of the mindset of the owner of the business. But we've also got to start to think about what our clients want as well. And there has been a big report out this week for the State of Recruitment 2021, the Employers Report. And it sort of gives you an idea of what employers are thinking about. And when we start to think about employers, we are also employers. So this is what we should be thinking about as well. 61%, so the biggest thing that they said, they want to improve their candidate experience. So when we start to think about our candidate experience from, right from that initial recruitment process, right through to training development to them exiting the business, how good is that? And that training bit is really important in the middle of it, because what you're doing is developing people all the way through that process. They then said 56% have filling existing vacancies as one of their main priorities, 44% hiring new roles, and 40% is workforce planning. So if you start to think about what they're talking about, 37% said employer branding EVP. The big 5 things that all clients are talking about is all about their people. They're not talking about reducing hiring costs. They're not talking about anything else along those lines. What they're talking about is how they can get more people into their business, how they can retain their existing workforce, and how they can improve their candidate experience all the way through that. And I think a massive part of that is all about how you train and develop your people. And it isn't just about training the core basics of recruitment. It's about training lots of other things as well. Welcome, Mr. Jacobs. I'm glad you can join us.
Thank you.
We'll also apologise for your tardiness, but that's fine.
Thanks for turning up, Paul. It's nice of you to gracious with your presence.
Oh, listen, you give me a tough time here. I've been working with a client for the last 2 hours, doing some brilliant coaching, you'll be delighted to know.
I thought, looking at your shirt, you might have been on a picnic there, but that's a whole new story.
Do you know, Howard, what you're just talking about the candidate experience, and that kind of links back into what I was saying about right now, we're in a candidate short market. So as employers, we're trying to hire in a candidate market, but as recruiters, we're trying to place for our clients and hire for our candidates in a candidate short market. I don't think we should forget that we will have a lot of recruiters who've never worked in a candidate short market, and it is a totally different skill set to work in a candidate short market than it is in a job short market. And we keep flip-flopping, don't we, with Brexit and austerity, and then COVID, and now recovery. Building into our development that ability to flex our methodology, our way of recruiting, our way of engaging with candidates, so that we deal with the fact that the market is changing all the time, and building resilience. It's got to be one of the things that we look at with our development for our team.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I mean, actually, all joking aside, the last 2 hours I've been coaching a couple of highly experienced recruitment consultants. One of them works in finance and the other works in legal. And we've been talking about this very point about a candidate short market, and really talking about the methodologies of networking, using the CRM effectively, data effectively, market mapping, making certain that people are extremely active on social media, on LinkedIn, and so forth. Identifying the best candidates, as we always use this cliche, in the market, not on the market. How we move away from utilizing job boards, moving far more towards using social media to identify candidates, looking at it from a medium to long-term perspective rather than short-term gain, and so forth. I mean, that's exactly the very subject I've just been spending a couple of hours discussing, because you're absolutely right. We are now in a candidate short market. This old cliche about the war for talent that we've consistently said, flip-flopping from, the clients having, employers having sort of the whip hand, to the situation we're now going to be in, where finding great candidates puts us in a position of, to some degree, a bit of power. And I spent time talking with them about something that I was trained to do in 1980, whatever it was, 1880.
1880, I think.
1880, with gas lamps and horse-drawn carriages were still around. I think Victoria was on the throne at that point. But I was taught to place great candidates in great jobs. That was my training. I was never taught to fill jobs. I was taught to find great candidates when they came into our offices and find them a job. And I think that mentality is entirely where we're going now. Yeah. Because sod's law comes in here. We get a great candidate, haven't got a job for them. We've got a job, of which there'll be plenty, and we haven't got the candidate for the job. We'll work on the great candidate, find that great candidate a role. And I think, this is about the training, the retraining. To your point, most of our consultants have not worked in this particular market before, and we have to get them trained, coached, and ready to adapt to the new climate. But what a climate we've got. We're about to enter the most
opportunity. Yeah.
So I think
maybe the best period for years.
As we talk about that, Paul, we've got to sort of, I think, put a proper conversation together about how that candidate market is. So if we go back to 2008, I go back to 2000 itself, 2008 was a very slow draw and pull out of recovery. And therefore the candidate market got slowly better and slowly stronger. Okay. We are now at what I would call the bathtub recovery. So it's dropped very quickly, little part at the bottom, and it's recovering really quickly as well. So it's not that hockey stick recovery. It is a straight upward recovery. We found that where we were saying 6 months ago that, temp's going to recover quickly. Well, temp and perm are now neck and neck. Number of jobs out there. So the whole market is going for it. But what we're saying is when the whole market is going for it, the whole market is coming out of lockdown. So it isn't this client is doing, I'm recruiting in 3 months' time, I'm recruiting in 6 months' time. Every client is recruiting now. So it isn't just a candidate shy market. It is an absolute bloodbath out there for clients trying to get candidates. So one of the questions here was, how do you foolproof your business? Recruitment has been renowned for headhunting, counter offers, and people asking to leave. Well, it's all about what you provide to the person and how you make the person feel inside the company. And a part of that is about the training and development that you provide to them, as well as the other things. And it goes back to that question, treat them well enough so they want to stay, etc. And so I think the next question that we sort of should throw up there as we get back into that training view is, I'm always asked these questions quite a lot. Is it better training from a one-to-one perspective, or is it better in a group session? What would be best from a training point of view?
Howard, if I could just quickly dart back, because one of the questions that
I never look backwards, mate. It's just like my driving. I've never seen a crash, but apparently there's lots of things happening behind me.
I'm not going to comment on that. Not on a webinar anyway. Just in terms of one of the things that I think people to think about is, and something that's served me well in the past, and Heather's probably used something similar, is just doing a really thorough training needs assessment. And a really good technique and tool is you break all the recruitment cycle down. So one of them would be, candidate attraction. You'd break it down in terms of all the different elements, and some Paul's just mentioned. You'd get the consultant to mark themselves out of 10. You would mark them as a manager out of 10. And then you'd sit down and have a conversation about either the score or why there was a gap between the score. And it's a really useful exercise, providing you do it thoroughly enough, to sit down and actually home in on the specific elements of recruitment that people need help with. One of the things we do, and I've definitely been guilty of this, you find a course and you sheep dip everybody on that course, but you don't actually work out whether everybody needs it.
That's a good point.
You've almost got to start from this the other way around and work out what each individual person's needs are. And I think also from a feeling important and valued perspective, if you've got a bespoke training plan for the next 12 months built around your needs, you're going to feel that somebody's investing in you, rather than just they've got a course and they're chucking you on the course just to tick a box.
Paul, I think spot on. Sorry, Heather, did you want to jump in?
What I was going to say is I think that works for all staff as well, not just our frontline recruiters. So I had a group of managers yesterday on a management development program, and actually one of the first things I did was get them to all do a mind map of their own role, to look at their areas of responsibility, look at their objectives, look at their own KPIs, and then mark themselves out. You know, are these things I'm any good at? Are these things I don't think? Are these things I enjoy doing? Are these things I don't enjoy doing? And then develop for themselves. What are their own plans for developing themselves and their skills? So I think it works at all levels in organisations and for our leaders as well, actually.
So to expand that, before you answer there, Paul, to expand that question a little bit then, because another question I was going to ask later on is, what's the importance of building strengths or bridging gaps? You know, and I think that's what we're talking about there. You know, are we training groups? Are we training individually? But actually what we're talking about is training individuals, whether it be a group or there, and having an individual plan. So it is about capitalizing on their strengths and then building their strengths, but then it's looking at where their weaknesses is and bridging those gaps that you have and developing them. And what we tend to find then is that you start to have your generic training, which everyone should be going on, and then individual stylized training for that person about their strengths, about their gaps and what we're doing. And once we start to understand that from the training needs analysis, then you can start to put a genuine, plan that's individual to that person, and that then starts to create your EVP. It starts to create that good feeling from the candidate or the consultant within the business, and it starts to improve the results. Once you start to see those, they start to see the improved results, they start to buy into it more and more. And you go into any sector, they train more than they probably way more than the recruitment market does, but they're constantly training their person to do the next job up, they're developing the next job. Let's get the core basics of each individual job and then help them develop their skills to take the next job. So it's all about how do you succession plan and get people through the business.
I think Howard, before I make a comment, just for those of us down south, Howard's reference to bathtub was bathtub. So I just want to make sure that every one of our listeners understood you, Howard. That was all.
There's no art in Bath. I just like to say that.
I think as leaders, there's a couple of points here that is very relevant to the question, and I think it's number one. As leaders, you need to be aware of what's going on in the market. I mean, we're talking here, as Heather did very eloquently, about the candidate short market. I think as leaders, we need to understand very clearly what's going on in our local markets or in our particular sectors. Now, number one, that insight, if you like, comes directly from the people leading the businesses, leading the divisions. We need to understand how our people need to adapt. The second thing, pretty obviously, I think, is to listen to our people. I mean, if you're not close enough to them to actually know what they're saying or how they're saying it, on a daily basis, how could you genuinely know what help they need to the points we've made about stylized training? It is different. And Paul, the guys are right. Everybody has different training needs, but how would you know what they are if you're not close enough to them? Now, I guess because, of course, we've been working remotely, it's become more challenging. However, many businesses now are gradually getting back into the office, if not full-time, certainly a few days a week. We have an opportunity now, I think, to sit and listen to our people. Our leaders have an opportunity to listen. But it begins with, what does the market want now? And how do we adapt our service accordingly?
So that leads to the next question. and this is the real killer question, I think, for all recruitment leaders and all recruitment companies. And this is the one that I'm really interested to sort of either get debate from our panel, listening to people on the call here, what their thoughts are. And I'm just going to give the question as it should be said. How often should we be training our people?
Oh, great question. Controversial. I'll go in with my 2 penneth at the beginning here, if I may. For me, it's all the time.
Yeah.
So for me, organizations that have a great culture have a culture of learning, and every conversation that you have should be a learning opportunity. So we don't make mistakes, we have learning opportunities. And for me, absolutely, learning isn't something that happens in a classroom or with a coach. It's a culture that we engender with our teams, where they own their own development and they are always thinking about, how could I have done that better? What could I try next time? Now, how we as an organization facilitate that, that's a whole nother question about how do you facilitate and how do you do it. But for me, learning happens all the time, every day, in every conversation.
Well, and I think when you talk to candidates, very often one of the reasons, and Paul's always saying this is right, of course, that people choose to change jobs is because they feel that the company is not investing in them. What do they mean by that? Well, to some degree, that's about their development and training. And if we fail to invest in our people, we fail to approach training as an ongoing daily process, then we may find our people leaving us and going to work for other recruitment businesses that value training more than we do. I don't think this is something that you can play at. You can't do it every now and then. As you rightly say, Heather, it's an ongoing process. I would add, though, just to use my usual cynical views, that you have to have people in your business who are prepared to be coached and trained. Unfortunately, we all come across people from time to time that think they know everything, when in fact they know very little about anything particularly. The old adage about when the pupil is ready, the teacher will come is very true. So we need people who are actively curious to improve, that want to change, that want to move. I think that describes the majority, but there are always one or two that aren't involved.
Do you know what, Paul? I pulled a comment that I was going to put up on the slide deck, that nobody learns more when they're asked to teach. So that you learn more when you're asked to teach. So if you have that type of person in your business, and I've come across those type of people in my business, I've just said, here's a training program, deliver this training program to my team, and you suddenly see that face go from that nice pinky color to that really drained white, gray, horrible color. Oh my God, yeah, I'm asking you to prove what you can say. Now go train it to everybody else. And you suddenly find that because they have to go and understand what they're training and what they're delivering, they upskill themselves. It's a great way to engender and bring them into the business. One of the things here is that as if people are working from home a couple of times a week, how should that be managed? We work in a reactive market, and training is unfortunately one of those things that are rearranged. Well, the answer is, if it's not important, then it will always get rearranged. If it's important, then it will always happen.
Yeah,
I'm currently running 2 boot camps. I've got 2 boot camps on the go. One I think it's at week 9, and I think the other's at week 3 or 4 now from there. And I've got 10 companies on each camp, and every week they tune in. And the results that they're saying that they are getting, and the results that are coming back, is that people are starting to really hone in. And these are people who are experienced recruiters to virgin recruiters, etc. And so even though it's just the basic mechanics of recruitment that we're talking about, it's nothing individual because it's too big to do it individually. Everyone is gaining from that process because they tune in, it's an hour, and they can refresh something and develop that. And I think what we've got to think about is that we spend that first 2 days training, or the first week training, and then we throw them on the phones and say, get on with it. And then 3 weeks later they say, I'm trying to understand this bit. You did it in training, but that's 3 weeks ago. They've got no chance of remembering all of that. So I say, give them the broad brush of recruitment first in, and then compartmentalize it constantly every single week, doing a new thing every week. And then, as we talked before about that individual sessions, when you've gone through their individual training needs analysis and their month-end report, then you can start to put individual sessions to them. So this training, how often should it be? Heather is the correct answer. Constantly.
Yeah, it's always, I'm always right.
Well,
yeah, come on.
Howard, sorry, can I just add to that? Apple, okay, reasonably successful organization. One of their key factors for hiring, one of their key criteria is trainability. So the willingness to learn is a key indicator of success for Apple. Let's say reasonably successful.
So if we take that comment then and then start to roll that around and start to think, well, why in recruitment are we so anti-training to a certain degree? We have this we've got a training program, but really what we've got is we've got a sink or swim program. So training's all well and good, but then how do we make it actually become the life of the business?
So look, I think, Howard, a couple of points to make here that, and I think this is a great point that Heater makes, as she's now known, according to Howard.
Yeah.
I think, and this is back to the point I made a moment ago. I think you want people in your business who see recruitment as a long-term profession. That if you view it in that sense, that this is an ongoing learning process, you're never going to reach a point where you know everything. And to your point, Howard, that when you coach and train people yourself, it actually is great because it actually reminds you remind yourself of best practice. But you need, in the first instance, people that see this job, see this career as something that's a lifelong learning process. If they have that attitude, then they will find, as the years progress, that they're never at a point where they know it all, that there's always something new to learn, not least because, as we've experienced over the last 12 months, strange things happen. Markets change beyond recognition, and you are forced to make changes under those circumstances. Now, many of us, and there's lots of people listening right now, have used the last 12 months to reinvent their services, to start new businesses, to do things differently. They've seen the last 12 months as an opportunity to learn, to change, rather than be frightened of it. And I think we need people in our businesses, if we can get them, it's not easy, who have that level of adaptability, that lack of fear, that curiosity. And I think when we interview our people, to Heather's point about Apple, we should be exploring that. We should be looking at it. Now, I don't think that necessarily links to academic qualifications. I think that's completely separate. I think it comes down to mindset.
Yeah, we've just had a really good question come in. I don't know whether you've picked it up, Howard.
I have picked it up, and I was going to sort of push it because some of my, to add to the question that we've just had about, how do we make it become the life of the business? What we need to start thinking about is the cost of training and the return on investment in training, and that will sort of certainly try and answer this question, because you're right, training doesn't make you money. Well, lack of training loses you far much more money. And I think that's the thing that we've got to sort of think about in that leisure. Now, your comment there, Heather, about Apple is absolutely right. They train their people, and they train their people to the nth degree. When we go into agencies, and I work into agencies, what I tend to find is those agencies that take training seriously are turning over more money, are making more profit, and have a lower attrition rate of staff than companies that do not have that facility or have that process in place. So there is a direct correlation between the cost of training and the return on investment. And if you start to think, if you can get someone from, if you say that the usual standard in recruitment is 0 to 13 weeks, if you make a placement in your first 13 weeks, woohoo, yippee, okay. If you can reduce that time and make them make more placements, then training becomes very important. And, what we've got to do is start to think about what we can develop from a training point of view to assist our billing. So I went to a client and I looked at a client and I think I spoke about this a couple of weeks ago, and they were having an awful problem with closing clients, and closing candidates, and they couldn't work out what was going wrong. I pulled their call stats. Not for the reason what most people think. I pulled their call stats to see how long that closing call was. That closing call on average was taking less than 5 minutes, which basically said the consultants were ringing up and saying, right, you've got the job, shall I send the paperwork out? And they were wondering why they were getting so many dropouts. We did a training session on it, a very in-depth training session on it. And what happened? The following month, the following month, and the following month after that, we had 100% acceptance of every single offer that we put out. And so there's a direct correlation there with going the training and the increase of return on investment and the increase of turnover by actually training on what the problem was. The company had got a little bit lazy, I think. I think the managers got a little bit lazy, a little bit blasé, and that had led to a problem. But by looking at the data, we identified the problem, we addressed it with training, and the return on investment was huge. That is what we should be thinking about, and that's why training should be constant, and why training should be both team and individual, based on the strengths of the companies, but also based on the gaps, because that was a gap that the company was developing that they hadn't looked at. But looking at certain things, we started to identify and train that. So I think that to make it become a lifeblood of the business is really important, but then looking and measuring the investment that you get. So how quickly can you get people to break even? How quickly can you get them to hit target? If you look at your business, how many of your company are hitting target? If they're not hitting target, then there's a training needs analysis there straight away of why aren't those people hitting target? What can we do to help them to hit target? What's stopping them hitting target? That will increase your ROI.
I'll go a step further than that actually as well, Howard. I mean, one of the things that a lot of people listening today have got to focus on, a lot of things we talk to our clients about, is succession planning. So, you're looking at training people to do their existing job well and be better at it, to your absolutely perfect point. I would go a step further and say, what are you doing to develop your people to the point that they can go beyond their current role? So how are you developing your future managers, your future directors? How do you make yourself ultimately redundant if you want to sell and exit from your business? Because one of the biggest challenges we have, especially in SME businesses, is developing people to the point that they can do your job for you. So I think training is absolutely relevant to the people in relation to the current role. But if I look at any of us, and if I take my own example, I started in recruitment as a junior interviewer on £40 a week. I ended up managing a business with 650 staff. My skill sets, my development was immense during that period of time. Obviously, I was incapable of running a business when I was 19 and running 650 staff, but my skill set, my training, my development had been very marked during those intervening years. And indeed, when I was running the business, I was constantly learning and developing. So it's not just about the training that you're giving people now to help them be better at what they're doing today. It is absolutely about where you want them to be and where they want to be in the next year, 2 years, 3 years.
I think there's another dimension to that, Paul, as well. So, you probably had a heck of a lot of skills development, because I'm sure you had a lot of skills gaps. But you would have also had personal development. Yeah. You'd have had coaching. You'd have had not the what you achieve, but the how you achieve it. Mm-hmm. And I think this is sometimes an area where we think training and development is about a course, and it's about how you do something and how you do it better. But sometimes we forget just that people are people, and they actually crave development for them as an individual. So whether it be self-awareness, how to get better results, how to have conversations and drive better behaviors. There are lots of other things that can help an organization's culture, which isn't training per se, but it is proper personal development.
Absolutely.
To Heather's point at the start, which is making sure that you're clear on your values, and then all your behaviors should be very much mirroring your values, but you should be having conversations about the values as well to help people develop personally and professionally.
And here's an idea. So I've worked with organizations in the past that so strongly believed in developing that learning culture that actually what they did was provided a pot of money for employees to spend on whatever they wanted. Yeah. So if you're trying to find something that ties people to your organization and that makes them less vulnerable to the rec who's going to call them and offer them the world somewhere else, and they're a big biller, invest in their personal development and don't look for an ROI on their current performance. You've got a big biller who's performing for you anyway. Give some of them back in terms of supporting their personal development in a field that's nothing to do with it, because you will get a return on that in spades.
It's interesting when you sort of look at that, and I think let's look at what lockdown has done. So before lockdown, if you'd have gone to most recruitment agencies and said, we want to put a training course in to help the mental well-being of your staff, I can guarantee you that would have been laughed out of a room by the majority of those people. But what we're doing when we think about mental well-being, mental health, what we are doing is we're training the mindset of that person to be better than what they are and to where they are. So it's a training session all the same. It's a development session for that person on an individual basis. And yet what Paul was talking about, that, and you were talking about Heather there, that personal training is absolutely part and parcel of that development of the human being, not just the development of the recruitment skill sets. Because if you remember, if we go back to the original comment, is that we think about when we recruit people in the moment before lockdown, what we were really on was recruit on skills, but then we would always be firing on behaviors, constantly firing on behaviors, where there's been a big mindset change about recruiting on behaviors and developing skills. But what you've also got to do is help develop and train those behaviors to become stronger, better, because they become a bigger ROI, because it's the behaviors that people actually buy, and it's the mindset of the people and how they sit within your business. If it's a very positive driven mindset, they'll be more productive. If you've got a negative mindset, it will be less productive for you. So it's not just training about the skill set, it's training about the mental ability of the people as well. So that you know, we're touching on things that are really sort of, I think, close to heart for everybody, but we've yet to recruitment to really open up and understand the power that that would have and how you inject your business forward. We go back to Apple, you know, look at the service you get from an Apple store when you walk into Apple. But I can tell you, every person on that Apple floor doesn't have a sales target. They do not target their people at all. And that's a really interesting sort of view, that when they're coming to talk to you, they're coming to talk to you because they genuinely want to help you, what your problem is, and solve your problem. Hence why you get far better service when you go to Apple than you would if you go to EE, and there's other service providers out there as well, but et cetera, from there. So that leads us to the next question. What data would you suggest would help us develop a training needs analysis or a training plan, from a generic one for the business to individual ones to help develop the person?
So I'll dive in because nobody else wants to. We've talked about this, Howard, you and I. We've helped a couple of organisations out in the last couple of weeks, haven't we? Talked about key performance indicators, and you've got a great analogy regarding that. I think it's really important that you understand what are the key metrics from a business perspective and an individual. And I think if you're measuring both parts of the recruitment process, you can quickly get a feel for what it means, whether it be you're tracking candidates registered, CVs out the door, whether it be interviews, whether it be offers, but using the CRM to automate the process and get that data out there is really important. The second thing that I just add, and I was banging on about this last year, measuring employee engagement is equally really important. And remember, what you measure as a leader speaks volumes about what's important to you and what the culture is really like. So one, for me, it's about the business and the individual performance metrics. The second thing is about measuring employee engagement. And the last piece in the jigsaw is in your quarterly reviews, measuring behaviours against the values. I think those four elements for me are really key.
Well said, Paul.
What do we think about net promoter scores, guys? Just to throw that in there.
Yeah, absolutely.
So in the Pulse surveys that we were promoting last year, we were generating a net promoter score. One of my clients has got the highest net promoter score I've ever come across in the recruitment industry. That's not to say we didn't have some really key areas that we needed to focus in on to get better, because there are, and there were, and we're working hard to fix those. But the overall net promoter score was off the scale. And I've been measuring, probably like you, Heather, I've been working off net promoter scores for God knows how many years.
I think on that net promoter score, Heather, what it gives you the perception from the outside looking in. And, you know, how often do we look at recruitment from the outside, looking through our rose tint glasses. This is great. We give a great service. And we keep talking about, do clients see us as a prospect or do they see us as a suspect? And it's having that bravery, first of all, to open up, to have a net promoter score, to get your clients to critique you. But then once you start to get the poor score, it's about then going back and having that honest conversation to finding out where those gaps are and what you can do to change those gaps and fill those gaps. And, it's interesting. I worked in a building in Leeds, and underneath it was a company called Catapult. And they were creating, or the first leaders to create, the monitoring of athletes. So if you watch all footballers and rugby players now, they've got a little square on the back or a little square on the chest, etc. And that's measuring everything: heart rate, blood pressure, fatigue, and it measures absolutely everything: how far they run in the match, how fast they run in the match, what they're doing every second in the match. And so it gives managers certain times they can say, right, I need to substitute Paul Jacobs because it looks like he's going to have an injury, and they pull Paul Jacobs off the pitch, not because he's poor.
No,
but
that would never have happened. I was too good for that.
So ask Norman Hunter. Anyway, so things like that now is all about the data that they're using constantly to identify where the strengths are and where the problems are. So that's what we need to think about. So using your CRM, as you said, Paul, creates that, but also using stuff like outside influence, asking your clients is really important. And if you think about next week, Paul, we've got clients on next week. We've got 3 clients coming on to talk about why recruitment is as it is and what we can do to change that. And it's going to be, my ears are red now from the sun. I think my ears may be red from something else next week, but we need to work on that. So, we have to start to think about, if we use our data correctly, we can use it from a generic business point of view, and we can do it from an individual point of view. That creates a huge amount of EVP and loyalty right across your business.
100%. And just conscious of time.
I want to say something.
We're doing it on purpose, Paul. Come on, let him.
Jacobs.
Matt, can I mute him?
This goes back to, I think, the starting point, which Heather said at the start. Everybody is going to be scrambling around to hire people over the next 6 months. And if you're not in a really good position, if you haven't been doing the good stuff, if you haven't taken stock of your EVP, if you haven't got all these things in place, training plans, development plans, mechanisms to help people develop and grow and be more successful, you are going to find it incredibly difficult to hire people or hire good people. And that is the number one thing that will hold your business back from, in my view.
Correct.
Mr. Jacobs, have you got something to say?
Funny you should ask me that, Mr. Greenwood.
Anyway, thanks for turning up, Paul.
Who knew I would have something to say? I have actually, and it was back to a point you made about Apple. So here's the thing that I think people very rarely think about, but from a PR point of view, if you want to make a great impression on your clients, let them know that you have a learning culture. Because I think that your point about Apple is very valid. We all know we get great service from Apple, and we all know that people are very well trained. I think when you train your people consistently, don't be shy to talk about that externally, because I think clients love to know that your people are consistently changing and learning and developing. I think that's a very important point. The second point is, what do we all know Apple for? We know them to produce outstanding bits of kit. I'm using one at the moment, but we also know it's expensive. So if your people are well trained and they provide your clients and candidates with a better quality service, as they will do with better training and development, then that should also be aligned with your margins, with your charge rates. And people pay for better quality service every time.
100%, Paul.
Worth waiting
100%.
for.
It was worth waiting for.
Thank you.
Yeah, love it.
Okay, let's cut him off now. That's one for this week. So, but what you're saying, Paul, is absolutely right. That if we think about that if we can increase our productivity and we can then increase our service to our clients, we can increase our charge rate. We are constantly looking in recruitment for this differentiator. What differentiates you from my other my competition, etc. Well, service is the biggest differentiator that you will get. And I use the analogy constantly about, you can buy a burger in McDonald's, you can buy a burger in the Ivy. What's the difference between buying the 2 burgers? The difference is the experience you get when you go through the Ivy. It's all about the service what you get when you go to the Ivy for that burger. McDonald's does the same thing. It feeds you, it cures your hunger, etc., as does the burger in the Ivy. But you pay 10 times, 20 times as much for that burger in the Ivy as you do in McDonald's. for the experience. And so if we can train our people to give our clients and our candidates, go back to the State of Recruitment 2021 report, 61% of all clients, the biggest thing that they said they need to do is improve the candidate's experience. Wow. If we can't learn from that, then there is something radically wrong.
Right.
And that's one about how do we train and look at our candidate experience. We look at each individual process. How do we improve our process? What can we do to make that process better? Can we make it faster, slicker, smoother, make it more efficient to the candidate and the client? And that's where Net Promoter Scores things come in. You know, what are we doing? And so that feedback becomes absolutely critical. And had that when we were on early on, because Sharpie was late as well as Mr. Jacobs earlier on. We were talking about training management courses, weren't we? And the courses that we've got, and we're trading material at the moment about the courses that we're doing with our clients. And to me, it's about all the way through the process, right from the head of the business being trained, right to the bottom person of the business being trained, and all having that individual training plan to develop that plan. So as we're hitting the time, guys, have you got anything else that you want to add regarding training and development?
Yeah, I just want to say, I think given the choice, Paul Sharp would rather have 10 Big Macs than a burger. I don't think there's any doubt about that whatsoever.
Oh, Mr. Jacobs, watch your back now. Watch your back.
Oh, you've set the pie muncher off there, Paul.
I know.
Oh, I'm fuming. I'm fuming sat here.
So on that note, ladies and gentlemen, next week, as I've mentioned, we have 3 clients coming on. I hope they will be very candid about the recruitment market, because I hope we will learn something from them that we can then take away and put in a development program to help improve our services to our clients. What a great link. Just thought of that. But that's what we should be doing. So please tune in next week. If you've got people that in the recruitment industry that isn't on these webinars, feel free to pass the links out to them. I think it's important that as an industry, we start to improve our reputation, therefore improve our service out to all. And yes, you can do it selfishly by one, but if we all change the way that we are perceived, we'll get a far better service, and we'll be able to charge more to our clients, and there'll be less pressure on margin.
And just on next week, Howard, people might want to get the senior consultants on it. It will be insightful, it will be informative, and it will be quite interesting.
Okay, I've got my boxing gloves and my gum shield in. Guys, thank you very much. Enjoy the summer. It will probably be over by Friday. If it is, enjoy it. Guys, thank you very much as always. We will leave you on Wednesday, and we will see you all next week.
See you guys. Be safe.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.